Hey all, here OS Reviews. About a year and a half ago, we checked out a retro emulator handheld console from Anbernic called the RG350. This was incredibly popular. Well, a lot has actually changed since then, and Anbernic now has a new flagship model that's called the RG351MP. It stands for Metal Pro, and that's because ever since the huge popularity of the 350, Anbernic has branched out into making pretty much two versions of their consoles. One which is the plastic shell model that is a little bit cheaper versus the M series, standing for metal, is, as the name implies, constructed out of a chunk of aluminum alloy. It comes in three colors, including this beautiful ocean blue, mint green, and a matte black. Instead of a dual-core 1 GHz processor on the 350, this model here now has a quad-core RK3326 processor clocked at 1.5 GHz. So this is a pretty significant bump in terms of performance. It's able to run things more smoothly. There's Rockchip 3326 we have seen on a number of other competing consoles at this point, including the Powkiddy RGB20 that we saw from earlier in the year. So packs specs that a lot of the current gen retro emulator consoles are using nowadays. It's not necessarily a standout, but like I said, if you are coming from an older model like the 350, it definitely will be an upgrade. And that's paired with 1 GB of RAM compared to 512 megabytes on the original, so about 2 times more. Another big improvement on here is the screen resolution has been upgraded. It's got a pretty sharp 640 by 480 resolution 3.5-inch display, which is IPS. It's fully laminated, there's no gap between the glass and the screen, and it also offers a 4:3 aspect ratio, noticeably a lot sharper than the previous 350s 320 by 240, rated to last around 6 to 7 hours of playback time. Now, it does support a micro SD card, which you can obviously load with more ROMs and games yourself. But by default, depending on where you pick it up, the model that we have, for example, has a 64 or 128 gigabyte card pre-installed with up to 20,000 games and built-in ROMs. 351 MPs don't have built-in Wi-Fi, however, they do come included with a Wi-Fi dongle that you can attach onto the USB port on the top, and that external Wi-Fi is due to what they claim having better reception because of the metal shell. In fact, that USB port can also be used for controllers. We have the Ocean Blue edition. Accessories include a USB Type-C data and charging cable, pretty standard stuff. We also get a adapter which can transform the USB Type-C to full-size Type-A, and then also the aforementioned Wi-Fi adapter card is also included here. Useful if you want to sync and save your game data, or if you're trying to upgrade the firmware, or even try to play back a few online supported games that can add this capability. Now, you even get a included screen protector in this particular box, which is a tempered glass one, so offers some extra protection, and they're just a quick user guide. Now, this model does also have haptic vibration motors, so it will vibrate and buzz to give you those sensation if you're playing back supported games. So overall, first impressions being that it is extremely premium feeling and a lot heavier than you would expect because, like I said, the entire chassis is made out of a solid chunk of aluminum, feels really cold and reassuring to the touch, even though it has almost identical overall dimensions as the original RG350. There is a pretty noticeable difference in terms of weight. So here they are next to each other. You can see there, again, very similar overall in terms of controls and D-pads. We do see a flip between the jog dial here and the four-way direction pad, but in fact, most of the differences are inside. 2 shoulder keys, and then on the very back, one other difference is that the previous 350 plastic didn't have any other grips, but the 351 MP has these 2 soft touch rubber accents, which actually has kind of a texture similar to sandstone, like on OnePlus's phone cases. It's a little bit more grippy and makes sense because metal can be a little slippery. Arguably though, that comes at the cost of a slightly heavier console, but overall I do think that this feels extremely premium. And then again, in terms of the protective layer on the front, it is made out of glass compared to plastic as well on the original model. So taking a closer look now at the interface, it is very colorful, shows off the vibrancy of this display. It really is a high quality panel. Again, laminated, so there's no real gaps even if you are shining it across the light. Great viewing angles, so as you're tilting it from various degrees, colors still look pretty accurate. The interface style is a bit more simplified versus what we saw on the 350 as well as with the Powkiddy RGB20. On here, it's basically just all the different emulators in terms of the consoles that you can play back, including divided by Game Boy, Nintendo, and other systems going in this loop, Super Nintendo, Nintendo 64, Game Boy Color, so on and so forth. But overall, again, just very vibrant and beautiful looking. Genesis, Game Gear. Let's just go through this one at a time to give you guys a better idea. Dreamcast. So most of the 90s consoles is pretty much what you can play on here. Again, the screen here now just really pops. PlayStation, PSP, and then all games, as well as your favorites that you can also set yourself, Nintendo DS, and arcade classics. Bring back the RG350. The colors are a bit more muted. It has more of a glare because it's not a fully laminated display, and otherwise you can see how there is a ton more pixelation as well if you just look closely. It's quite impressive in terms of the contrast and the difference there in detail. So I can select on a particular menu and see all the different games under that particular system. I can also slide left and right to go through all of the different menus of the other consoles as well. So overall, it just cycles in this carousel view. I can also tap on the start to also go into additional settings for the emulation, take a look at if I want to enable other controls. Bluetooth is another capability that you can also enable, as well as how to save and load back your different progress states as you're gaming. It also allows us to change the theme. So let's say I want to try out the second theme, which has been included on here, which is now displayed in this vertical list instead of horizontal, as you can see there. The beauty of these Anbernic systems is in the retro emulator community, they are super popular. So what that means is you'll find a lot of support from community members that will tell you how to further customize, even try installing other operating systems as well as UIs on here. So it's fully customizable. With the Wi-Fi adapter plugged in, you're able to also see if there's any software updates, download additional themes, mostly open source from GitHub. Obviously you can tweak that yourself, but just by contrast, again, the 350 had more of almost like a Pocket PC feel to it out of the box in terms of its UI. So there was a bit more complicated, but aside from the games folder, or really the emulators, I should say, you could also find things a little bit more easily under applications, things like a clock, as well as other things like a terminal, and let's say watching back some videos, features which are now hidden compared to before. Again, the majority of games that you'll be playing on here, especially things like Pokemon, Game Boy games, they all are playing at full speed, no lag or delay, everything looks great, although it is worth noting that some of these consoles, especially let's say Game Boy, the original that is, will still be showing at a slightly lower resolution than the technical 640 by 480 that the screen is capable of. And in this sense, you won't really get the full advantage of the crisp panel on here. But that's not the same case if you were playing back, let's say, a PS1 game or a PSP game. Systems which natively support a slightly higher resolution display, you get that full advantage of the upgraded panel. But in any case, it looks great in terms of the overall quality, the brightness level, and everything is pretty enjoyable in terms of all the buttons and layout. I really had no issues when it comes to just navigating around. Things feel extremely precise and responsive. In fact, as good, I would say, really as any other system from Nintendo or Sony in terms of just how nice the keys and the overall navigation feels. No stickiness or anything like that. Now, as we start getting into the realm of, let's say, Nintendo DS and PSP games, things which are a little bit more graphically demanding, I will still say that there are moments of occasional hesitation, but for the most part, everything is still definitely playable, and all the controls are mapped as you would expect. So this is an example of Nintendo DS, because that system obviously has dual displays. On here, you just get a slightly more cramped experience. You have to use the D-pad to navigate, but it is playable, and you get the versatility of trying out any ROM that you can just pop in and play. You can also tap on the shoulder key as well to switch into just one display view or the other. This particular example, we're looking at Assassin's Creed, so it does have a bit more of 3D graphics going on. You can see that it might not be completely buttery smooth compared to, say, if we were using a slightly older system, but overall, definitely not bad in terms of the overall experience. It's still more than playable, and overall, again, you get the idea. Loading speeds are still quite fast. There's no real thermal throttling or anything like that, of course, on these older games. The system still feels pretty cool to the touch. And here we have an example of Super Mario, and again, everything working pretty much as expected. Very good in terms of responsiveness and playability. No real issues here at all. And then really same thing goes when it comes to PSP games. That's another system where you have to sometimes check on the titles. Things might not be 100% optimized. I have seen at times a few games which might have a moment or two of hesitation, but overall, again, the experience is still more than playable. So that's more or less it as far as our hands-on review of the new Anbernic RG351MP, and their most premium retro handheld emulator console yet, which has just upgrades all around, from the beautiful display to just a faster processor versus the 350, as well as excellent controls which are still retained, and again, just giving you an impressive experience if you're into retro gaming. So you can check out more details if you're interested in the links down below, but for now that's been our video. Thanks for watching here at OS Reviews. That's been the Anbernic RG351MP.